Hi everyone, we are going to be talking about counter-aggression today. This was originally our March Safe Crisis Management refresher, and because of the situation around the coronavirus, we've had to cancel that. But this is still really good information and something that you may even find useful in the current situation while you are maybe spending a little bit more time with the kids and families that we work with. So I just wanted to share this with you, give you some helpful information that I think you can use now and probably in the future. So let's talk about counter-aggression. So our agenda for today is just going to be a quick discussion of some safe crisis management updates. I wanted to go over those anyways. I know we're not going to get to do any physical practice obviously today because we're not together, but I still want to go through just a couple things. We're going to have some short content related to counter-aggression and management of counter-aggression. We'll go over what is counter-aggression, why are we talking about it, and what can we do about it. And then we will have a discussion of the additional resource of a counter-aggression inventory. And I think this will all take us 30 minutes or less. I do want to mention that the counter-aggression inventory should be included in the email if I email this out to everyone. Otherwise, I will stick it on the P drive so that's accessible there. Or if you're listening to this and you can't access it through the email that I sent or the P drive, feel free to shoot me an email and I will get you a copy of it. So just a reminder that normally you need about 12 hours yearly to maintain certification. That's achieved through initial certification, which is the 3-day course that hopefully you only have to do once. Refreshers, which are 4 times a year. They are every quarter, and they're 2 hours, an hour of content and an hour of physical practice. And then the recertification, which is done once a year, in January for most people, and September for the school and some other people. But that's a 1 day, 5 hours. We redo your test. We redo your written and physical tests, I should say. And you get content as well. So those are the things that normally we have to do. And because of the situation we're in, we can't do the refreshers this month. So hopefully we'll be able to do the next set of them, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to have a CERT class. Safe Crisis Management has actually emailed out some guidance and understands that this may be a challenging time to complete the certification, and so they are being understanding about needing to relax some of the rules, but still want you to get as much information as you can, which this is where we can give you the content in a way that's safe and healthy for everyone. So just a reminder too that we certify staff at one of 4 levels. So level 1 means that you can do all assists. A level 2 means that you can only be the assistant, staff, and an assist, so you cannot take lead. You kind of remember when we practice that we practice calling in our assistant and we practice being an assistant. And if you're a level 2, you can only assist. If you're a level 3, that means you can only do standing assists. So you're not going to do anything on the floor and you're not going to do any carries. Those are the same kind of muscle groups and body movements to do the on the floor as there are carries. And so if you have a physical restriction that allows you only to do standing, we also want you to stay away from doing the carries. And then level 4 is the people that are the de-escalation experts. So they can only use content. They cannot do any of the physical assists, but they have a lot of tools in their pockets. The content of Safe Crisis Management is really great. There's a lot of great de-escalation skills. And most people, make it their goal to use those de-escalation skills and never get into a physical assist situation. So that's a level 4. If you are a level 3 or a level 4, you need to have a waiver turned in to HR every year. I have the waivers. You can get them from me normally, and you can get that waiver and then you turn it into HR. So HR keeps track of that. But if you're a level 3 or a level 4, whether that will be forever or whether it's because you just have something going on right now that hopefully in the future you can be a level 1 or level 2, you still will need a waiver. We don't need everyone to stay for the whole time. That's a little bit different when we're doing in-person class. If you do miss a refresher, we have been asking you to come to a certification practice. We do the certification for 3 days, and you would just need to come to the practice, which is usually about 12:30 to 4 on one of those days to make up the time that you miss with the refresher. That's going to look a little different. So don't worry about that right now. We'll worry about that in the future. This PowerPoint was made before we knew what was going to happen with the virus. So another thing to just remind you, and this is something I've kind of been noticing the incident reports, and sometimes incident reports are hard because you don't get the whole picture, you weren't there, but I do check them every so often just to kind of see what's going on, what are the trends, what are the holds or assists that people are using, what are the ones that maybe they're having a hard time remembering the name of, and so that way I know what to hit on a little bit in training. And I've just noticed that it seems like in some of the holds, such as an upper torso or cradle, or even a cross arm assist, that we are putting kids in those assists and then we are escorting, we are moving them somewhere, like to their room or to the timeout room or back to the house in those assists. And that's not okay. Almost all the assists in SCM are meant to be used in a stationary way, which means that when we put kids, for instance, in upper torso, we put them in an upper torso and we keep them there until they have calmed down, or we move to another assist. So there's only 2 assists that we can escort kids in, that we can move them in if they need to be moved somewhere. So I'll give you a minute just to think about what you think those might be. So the first one is an extended arm escort, right? This is one of the first skills that we practice. And this is the one where you have your arm locked and you have your foot in line, your foot in line with their back foot. Depending on which foot you have forward, it's going to make a difference. And you're shuffling that back foot behind you so that you keep your balance. And this is the one where when the child resists, we put our arm across their back and kind of hunker down so that they can't hit us. And then once they're calm, we can resume that escort. So that's one of the more least restrictive escort options we have. And the other one is the cradle carry. So the cradle carry is the most restrictive escort that we have. It should be only used in emergency situations. So a good example is if there's a kid who is in the middle of the rock road and we have put them in a hold or an assist to bring them back to campus, this would be a safe time to go ahead and use a carry. We aren't going to be using the hook carry. It was pretty apparent to us during the recertification process that this was a really challenging carry, that the hook carry just was really hard. And, we want safe crisis management to be safe for our staff and for our kids. And when things are really difficult and challenging, and when it's not comfortable for the staff or for the kid, and it's not a assist that we really need, we're going to do our job to make sure that we eliminate that from our repertoire. So the hook or the cradle carry is the only carry we're going to be using, whereas the one that one staff has the client in a cradle, and then the other staff come and help with the legs. You can have one staff grab both legs and then grab further down towards the feet. You can have staff, a staff on each leg and then another staff further down on the feet. So there's a lot of ways to do it, but we'll continue to practice that one. So that one is the cradle carry. So it's one of the only approved ways to escort and to move kids. So let's get into what is counter-aggression. Counter-aggression is a human instinct that occurs when individuals join in with acting out individuals by internalizing their aggression, road rage, right? So it's our internalized of aggression that we take out on someone else because we're angry and we're frustrated and we take it out on someone else. I've posted the interaction cycle here, and just to remind you, this is exactly how counter-aggression happens, right? We have an individual's behavior right here, and then that stimulates a staff's emotional or cognitive reaction, which means the way we think and the way we feel, right? Then there's the staff behavior, right? We choose to react and or to respond, I should say, either one. And then we have that individual or that client's cognitive or emotional reaction, which means the way they think and the way they feel. And then that in turn creates more of their behavior, right? How they think and how they feel. And so this cycle just continues and continues, right? And like I said, it can be a positive or a negative cycle because we're thinking about how we react or respond is important. So a response, right, is thought out, it's calm, it's de-escalating, whereas a reaction is when someone has caught you off guard and you lash out, you react, you say something you shouldn't. And so that's what counter-aggression is, right? Is when we react. And a lot of times this is led to insult behavior, right? And we know that insult behaviors are attacks on our professionalism, it's attacks on our hearth and our home, the things that we value, and it's an attack on our personal appearance. And these are the three areas that kids often attack. And we talked about insult behavior quite at length at our recertification. So I hope that you guys remember some examples and some things. But insult behavior is usually what triggers us, right? It's usually the last straw of maybe already a rough day or a rough week or a rough hour. So we have to think about insult behavior. We have to be ready for it and prepared for it. And in order to do that, we have to think about what we know about insult behavior. So I'll give you a few minutes to think about what you know about insult behavior. A few seconds, I should say. So it's not personal, right? Kids say things, and people in general say things to be hurtful when they want to hurt us and when they're angry and when they want to trust us and see, hey, are you really there? Are you really a good adult? It's not personal. It's not usually even truthful. Kids will often apologize for it later, right? When they're in a clear stage, they're in that red brain we talk about. It's also predictable, right? We just talked about this, that it's predictable. We know that it's going to happen. We know that these are the areas they're going to attack. We can be prepared for it, and we can have responses, right? You know, that professional one is an example I use all the time because kids will often say things like, well, you're just paid to be here. You don't really care about me. And being able to kind of say, like, I chose this job. Like, I could be doing a lot of other jobs, and this is the one I chose. And I really don't get paid that much. I could make more somewhere else. But that's not what's important to me. What's important to me is you. and that I'm here to care about you. And so having something like that for each one of these is really important. And when it's predictable, we can do that. We can be prepared for that. So let's consider the brain and counter-aggression. Now, some of you, hopefully a lot of you, have been to our Trauma 101 training and know that we talk about 3 areas of your brain: your green brain, your red brain, and your yellow brain. And so I want to bring that in a little bit today and talk about how where we are in our brain has an effect on how we respond to the people around us, including the kids that we work with. And so when we're in a place of counter-aggression, where do you think we are in our brain? If you said our red brain or our yellow brain, for those of you who are good at remembering your trauma knowledge from previous trainings, you'd be right. So red brain, remember, is that flight, fight, or freeze response. It is where the basic functions of survival come from. And so when we act in a counter-aggressive way to someone, when we escalate them, when we yell at someone, when we are physical with someone, we are in probably that red or even that yellow brain, because that yellow brain is where our emotions are and where things are heightened. So we can be in that yellow brain too. So where do you think we need to be in our brain in order to respond versus react? And remember, we talked about the difference between these two a little while ago. So responding is planned, it's thoughtful, it's calm, it's de-escalating, whereas reaction is off the cuff. It's whatever flies out of your mouth. It's quick. It's usually an escalating behavior, right? So where do we need to be in order to respond, in order to have that calm, de-escalated response? Right, we want to be in that green brain where we are thinking things through, where we are considering what we're going to say before we say it, right? That self-talk, where we are reminding ourselves that these are kids who have struggles and challenges and who have experienced trauma, or maybe even other staff that we come into contact with, reminding ourselves. We're kind of talking ourselves down a little bit, talking ourselves out of that red or yellow place into that green place, so that we can have a healthy interaction. And some of you may have watched a video that we sent out not too long ago. Dr. Bruce Perry, who is a trauma expert, talking about how to emotionally connect during the coronavirus. And one of the things he said in there and talked about that I thought was really helpful was the idea of regulate, relate, and respond. And what that means is we have to regulate ourselves first, relate to whatever that person who's coming at us is going through, whether that's another employee or a kid. We think about maybe where they're coming from. We think about maybe the trauma that we know they've experienced. We think about something stressful that's going on in their personal life, and then we respond to them, right? Because it's often been said that an unregulated person will not be able to regulate another unregulated person, right? Which simply means if 2 people come into a room and both of them are yelling and screaming at each other, not much is going to get accomplished, right? We have to come into the room with our kids and sometimes with other employees as that calm, regulated person, the adult who understands that our kids have been through trauma, that they react in certain ways that are not personal, and that calls on us to be the person to be calm and to de-escalate them. So let's talk a little bit about why does counter-aggression happen? We can be caught in a conflict or an interaction cycle, which is that first picture we talked about where kids' behavior, staff behavior, they all interact with each other. So we can get caught into an unhealthy pattern of that, right? They're reacting to us, we're reacting to them, they're reacting to us. It can also be a violation of values and beliefs. That's that insult behavior, right? Things that they say that trigger us because of a belief or a value that we have, or something that is really important to our identity, and they say something that can trigger us. Simply being in a bad mood, personal concerns, or environmental concerns. We're going to talk about self-care and how to talk to your supervisor about this. It's so important because we are not robots and we have lives outside of our job, and we bring those lives into our jobs. And there are days where it's probably easier to come to work and say, I'm glad I can work on someone else's problems and leave my problems at home. But there are days where that's not so easy, and where we may be a little bit more easy to set off that day because we've just had to deal with all kinds of things at home. And so that can happen. Reaction to a feeling of helplessness. I mean, I know the kids that you work with are challenging, and they seem to maybe have the same behaviors over and over and over again. Or maybe you've seen them do a really good job with a behavior, and then the next time they just blow it. And it's like, how in the world did you have this last week and this week you can't do it? And I know last week that you could handle that other peer saying something to you. You totally handled it like a champ. And then this week they said something to you and you're ready to fight them. So I think that's frustrating. I think that is that feeling of helplessness. And that can look a lot of different ways, but I think a lot of times it's with our kids, like knowing they can do better, knowing that they have challenging behaviors that repeat themselves, and feel like we have tried everything. And what is it going to take? What do you want from me kind of feeling sometimes, right? Prejudging a client in a crisis. I think one of the perfect examples of this, or way to think about it, is for those of you who have done new employee orientation, when our CEO has been there and he has said, we see our kids on their worst day when they come here, and nobody wants to be judged on their worst day. And that's really true. We see our kids in really tough places, and we hope that after being here for a little while, that gets better. But often things happen that are a crisis for them, and they have a certain reaction, and we just tend to say, oh, that's just how Jamie acts. Like, he just acts like that. That's just his behavior. That's just who he is. And so that causes us to get frustrated and to say, how dare you act like this and think this behavior is acceptable, when we don't consider the crisis that they're in. And the last one is unfinished psychological business. A lot of us got into this work because we had our own psychological things happen, right? We may have had a tough childhood. We may have had a strong figure who was outside of our home that was a person who we could rely on, and we want to be that for another kid. But we have to be careful to not take those things into the workplace all the time. And when something happens at work that reminds us of something that's happened personally, that can set us off, right? And so there's a lot of different things that can happen within that unfinished psychological business. I got this from a website I thought was really great and helpful in talking about why we often experience counter-aggression. And so I've included the link if that's something you want to explore more. So why are we even talking about this? Like, this, this is what it is. This is why it happens. This is what is happening in our brain when it happens. Like, why are we spending this 30 minutes? Why did I want to make sure you guys got this information, even though we're not going to be able to have a refresher? And you may think about a few things. But first is because it happens to all of us, right? We all have moments in our personal life, in our professional life, with kids that we work with staff that we work with our supervisor, where for whatever reason on that whatever day, we react. And hopefully we can keep that to a minimum and it doesn't turn into a situation where we end up hurting someone. But it happens. And we don't walk into work thinking, I can't wait to escalate Johnny today. I can't wait to make him fly off the handle. We probably do the opposite. We probably walk into work thinking, like, I hope today is a calm day. Or I hope today is a somewhat normal day, whatever normal looks like for you. But we don't walk into work just getting excited to want to escalate someone through the roof. And if you do, you probably need to find a different job. Also, counter-aggression is potentially re-traumatizing. We talk about the components of trauma-informed care. And if you've taken Trauma 101, this will also be a refresher for you. But the 4 R's of trauma are realize, recognize, respond, and resist. And part of resisting re-traumatizing a kid is being aware of our own counter-aggression and not allowing that to come out on a regular basis, and definitely not allowing it to come out in a way that hurts a child, physically, emotionally, or verbally. Safety, choice, empowerment, trust, and collaboration are those components of trauma-informed care that we talk about a lot. I felt like safety and trust are probably 2 that counter-aggression really fits in. So if we're going to be providing a safe place for kids, that's not going to be a place where they experience counter-aggression. If we're providing a place of trust where kids and employees feel like they can trust us, this is not going to be a place where they're experiencing counter-aggression. We're also engaging in validating an unhealthy coping skill or communication pattern. When we blow up on our kids or another staff member in front of a kid and are counter-aggressive to them, we are showing and modeling the kids we work with that this is okay. We are showing them this is how adults handle when they're angry or frustrated or helpless or overwhelmed. We are showing them that this is okay. And so that old adage of do what I say, not what I do, just doesn't work. Kids do what we do, and they watch and they pay attention. And if you get to act like someone's screaming and cussing someone out, they're going to think that that's okay. And they've probably seen that in their lives, and so this is our chance to get to make that different for them. Which goes into the we're affirming kids' held beliefs about adults. Like, this is how adults act. This is what I can expect from adults in my life, is that they come at me in this way. When it goes unchecked or isn't acknowledged, we have to start worrying about secondary traumatic stress. And we all have this at some level, but if it's not taken care of, it becomes dangerous, right? If we don't acknowledge that today I'm really easy to be set off, or today I'm going to need to do something so that I don't go off on someone, we're going to cause some potential harm to ourselves or to others. And we're going to talk about what to do in those situations. And then it can lead to negligence or abuse in extreme cases. Like I said, when kids are physically, emotionally, verbally abused in our care, this is what happens, is that people are so frustrated and they are to the top of their limit with what these kids or another employee has thrown at them, and they're not talking about it, and they're not taking breaks where they need to. That's when we hurt kids, and we don't want to do that. So let's talk about what we can do about it. I think number 1 is open communication. Like I said, we just need to acknowledge that counter-aggression, like secondary traumatic stress, and we talk about that training, is part of our job. It's going to happen for a variety of reasons. The kids that we work with and the employees that we work with and the situations we find ourselves in our jobs are going to cause us to be escalated. So I think it's important that with your supervisor, that you're talking about this, that you're sharing how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis or in your supervision time with coworkers that you feel safe or comfortable with, obviously not in front of the kids, but when it's safe to do that, being able to share. I think it's important for other coworkers and your supervisor to know if there are clients that tend to really push your buttons. It's okay to say privately to another coworker or to your supervisor in confidence, Billy over here, he just really annoys me and I just have a short rope with him. It's good for us to acknowledge that, and the kids don't need to know that. But it's good that other people around us who are doing this job with us know that, so they can help us out. We talk about tapping out, and that's just simply saying you need to take a break or I need to take a break. So being able to do that for yourself, and then also listen when someone else says it to you. We think about this in the context of a physical assist situation where we may notice that someone's becoming counter-aggressive in that situation and they need to be tapped out, or we notice they're exhausted and need to be tapped out. Hopefully the assist isn't going on that long. But it can also happen just in regular conversation. It is okay to do this. It's okay to say it to other people. And when other people say it to you, you need to not be offended, but you need to say thank you and take it and go take your break and listen to them. To do that professional courage, to do the right thing, even when it's not easy. Process challenging situation with supervisor. We talked about this. It doesn't have to get to a physical assist situation for it to be something that you're debriefing with your supervisor about, because it can be something that brings up something in your past. It could be a conversation with a kid who says something that's really hurtful. A kid who you thought you had a good relationship with, who then one day just loses it on you. So all those situations are things to be brought up with your supervisor and really process and share those feelings and talk about what those feelings, because those are hard. Those are hard situations. The second kind of area to think about is self-care. And we need to think about intervention and prevention. And I talk about this more in depth in our secondary traumatic stress training, so I'm going to try and recap it quickly here. But by intervention, I mean that there should be things you do all the time, knowing that your job is stressful. For instance, I don't have my email on my work phone. I have certain ways that I leave and go into my space at the beginning and the end of the day that makes sense for me. I have certain things I do when I get home to decompress that I do every day or most days. I'm not sure if I said that right. That's prevention, right? I do that before there's a problem. And then you have the intervention piece, which are the things that you may step it up a notch, right? So maybe you work out, twice a week. Well, if it's been a really hard week, you might work out 3 times a week. Or maybe you see some friends that aren't in your field. That's kind of important. Once a month, but for your intervention, you may call or text them on your way home just to talk. Or maybe you have a certain song that you listen to on the car when it's been a rough day. I used to have some of those that I would put a certain song in when it had been a rough day, right? And so those are things you need to think about. Maybe you go get a massage or a pedicure. Not necessarily you do that every week, but if it's been a specifically hard week, you may do that. You may go get a drink at Quick Trip or Starbucks. And those are things you don't do every day before work, but if it's been a very hard week, you may do that. The other thing that Bruce Perry talked about in his video that I thought was interesting was the idea of dosing. So we have to do little things throughout our week and throughout our day, right? Little doses of self-care. We can't wait till the end of the week and then just go do something self-care. And doing that is when people engage in unhealthy self-care, right? When people probably drink too much, or when people maybe work out to the point where it's not healthy. But dosing is important, right? So we're doing little things throughout our week, right? We're doing a couple exercise classes or taking a couple walks throughout the week. We are thinking about how we're entering our space during the day. We're taking a walk during the day if we need to do that. Take time off the rest of your shift, the day off. This is something to talk to your supervisor. What's available to you? If you're so escalated that you don't feel like you can finish your shift, how do you communicate that? Because I can tell you, we'd rather you take your shift off than hurt someone. And that's something you may need to communicate to your supervisor. Now, of course, if it's an all the time thing, that's going to be concern. But if it's really a needed thing, take it. If it's been a really tough week and you have time off and you need to take Friday off, how do you communicate that? And remind yourself why you do your job. You know, this is something I talk about in secondary traumatic stress training too. Our why is so important. And when we've had those days where we just feel like, why did I choose this job? Why am I putting myself through this? Is anything I'm doing making any difference? Is it making things worse? Sometimes we feel that way. And so reminding ourselves like, no, I got into this job to help kids because I know they're important and these kids need someone in their corner. And I remember kid X and kid Y and kid Z and how I've helped them. And I know even though Billy screamed at me today for who knows what, that I have done things just by being a safe adult with him that somewhere are making a difference, even if I can't see it. So it's conversations like that to remind yourself, this is why I do that. I don't know if some of you too may put things in the staff office that maybe kids have said, or you may have your own personal things where kids have written you a note or given you something as just a little token, like a card that they made or something. I used to kind of keep those things because they were important to me, and they were reminders of why I did the job that I did on days that it was hard. So keep some of those reminders around. If you do post them in the staff office, or like I used to post them in my office, I would cover up kids' names so it's confidential. But yeah, hang some of that stuff up, you know, to remind yourself. And then remind yourself of a client's trauma history. We have to, sometimes we just see the behavior and it's so extreme and so frustrating that we forget the things that our kids have been through. Sometimes are unimaginable, and the way the adults in their life have treated them are just terrible and awful. And so there's a reason they're acting the way they are. You know, there's a reason behind the behavior. And then access the Employee Assistance Program, the EAP. If you don't know how to access that, I'm pretty sure there was an email that was sent out this week from HR with everything going on about how to access that. But talk to your supervisor, because there's a lot of resources, including counseling and financial planning, I think even legal advice. So access that. That's a great resource for you. So this is the counter-aggression inventory that will be that's included in the email with this PowerPoint. I'll also try and put it on the P drive. It's kind of blurry and hard to see here. Basically, you just go through and check off some things that that apply to you. And I would encourage you to do this, and then talk about it with supervisor or a trusted coworker and say, these are kind of the things that really set me off. These are the things that are really hard for me. It says things like, I become frustrated when individuals do not follow directions. They need to know I'm in charge. You can insult me all you want, but never insult my family. So this is just really important to think about, um, you know, to think about your own counter aggression and where that's coming from and what things really set you off and what your hot buttons are. Um, and where you may feel some counter aggression towards the kids and the employees that you work with. So fill that out and go over it. We are going to do it in person and discuss it, but unfortunately, we don't have that ability because of the situation. So just a few last things. The work you do is hard, and there's no way to mince that. It's just a difficult job, and you have to expect that it's going to be challenging, and that secondary traumatic stress is going to be real, and so you have to be prepared to walk into this job and have people push your buttons, and to be prepared to regulate yourself. You deserve to be regulated. You deserve to have healthy self-care. You deserve that. You deserve to be taken care of when you are in a job that's this stressful. Remember the dosing we talked about. Like we said, be aware of your counter aggression and expect it. And you can't regulate someone else if you're unregulated. We kind of talked about that too. So thanks for listening today. Feel free to email me if you have any questions or any thoughts. We're right at about 40 minutes, so we took about an extra 10 minutes than I thought. I guess we're a little over 40 minutes. But hopefully this was really helpful for you in thinking about counter aggression. And, if some of the things I talked about were a little confusing when we were talking about the trauma pieces and the brain pieces, I encourage you to listen to some of our other trauma trainings or attend some of those. We're hopefully going to be getting some of those up so you could do those digitally as well. So thanks for coming today and listening.